When Nintendo essentially shadow announced their Metroid Prime Retrospective book back in a September 2025 Nintendo Direct, I had mixed reactions. On one hand, I was excited for the book. I've collected a handful of Nintendo Special Edition art books over the years, from Metroid Dread's book to the Book of Tears of the Kingdom. I'll take any excuse to buy any Metroid-related products, so there was genuine excitement. On the other hand, I felt a pang of sadness, realizing that the title alone, Metroid Prime Retrospective, for Prime 1, 2, and 3, almost certainly meant that we wouldn't be getting remasters of Prime 2 or 3 before the launch of Prime 4 later this year. If you followed this channel for any extent of time, you know I'm a huge Metroid fan. If that wasn't already apparent from the intro, I have very fond memories spending my early years cooped up in the basement with my brothers around our Wii while we attempted to help each other navigate the caverns and puzzles of the Prime trilogy, one of the first Wii games we got when our parents bought us the console back in 2009. When Nintendo dropped the Prime 1 remaster in early 2023, I felt very, very hopeful that this meant they'd remaster the rest of the Prime trilogy as well in anticipation for Prime 4. I felt even more hopeful when sales of Prime Remastered exceeded expectations at a reasonable $40. Shocking, considering that despite being a remaster, the dev team essentially remade the entire game from scratch using entirely original and new assets, making quality of life improvements, and having the game run at an astonishing 60 frames per second at all times on the Switch 1 hardware. A truly fantastic feat of ingenuity, in my opinion, on behalf of the developers. It goes without saying that Prime Remastered is one of the best looking, if not the best looking Switch title, especially given how shit like Legend ZA, a game likely with a much higher budget, and a much higher price point I might add, looks in comparison. But I digress. I wanted to make this video not only to laud the achievement that is the Prime Retrospective art book, but the series in general, to discuss key details included within its pages. The book is set up like this. There's key artwork, bosses, environments, Samus suits and such, creatures, and other images pertaining to the development of these games. Alongside log entries from within the games themselves are producer's notes, in which Kensuke Tanabe, the producer of the Metroid Prime series, comments or expands upon the artwork and the concepts present. There are a handful of these blurbs throughout the book, with a few in particular highlighting information that I think is reiterating here for those who may not have purchased the book yet or gotten their hands on a copy. Birth of a Miracle. We're lucky we even got the Prime trilogy. Tanabe states in one of the producer's blurbs that the way the project came about was a miracle. It was not originally planned until Miyamoto suggested making an FPS being developed by Retro Studios, a Metroid game for the GameCube way back in the early 2000s. Obviously, transitioning from 2D to 3D is a difficult task, and the accelerated timeline by corporate really tested the limits of the dev team. But somehow, despite these circumstances, the game that came together somewhat miraculously became our beloved Metroid Prime. Tanabe also states that the game was initially intended as a standalone, but during the development process, the idea to make it a trilogy came about when they were working on the concept for Dark Samus, Prime 2. Prime 2's development was notoriously difficult given the faster turnaround required to take advantage of Prime 1's success. Rather than opting to make things easier on themselves, the team decided they wouldn't reuse any assets from Prime 1 while developing Prime 2, a decision that I find to be fascinating. The team's passion for the entire trilogy is made evident with its creative decisions like this made over the years. One note of intrigue I found in this section was one in which Tanabe states that playtesters found the bosses in Prime 2 to be far too difficult. I definitely remember struggling immensely as a kid against bosses like the Grapple Guardian and Quadraxis. Not only was I terrified of the Dark World as a concept, for the longest time my brothers and I couldn't even get past the reanimated corpses of the Galactic Federation troopers at the beginning of the game, but battling an enormous robot felt particularly horrifying to my child mind. Tanabe also suggests Prime 2's darker themes could be a result of the team's increased pressure to release a worthwhile successor to Prime 1. The note, in my opinion, which is of the highest regard in this entire book, can be found in this section, specifically on page 107, for those of you reading along at home. In this note, Tanabe mentions the emphasis on multiplayer features for Prime 2, feeling the 4-player local play was extremely limited. The lines following are the juiciest, and I quote, "Being of its time, it was designed for local play, so the number of players who actually experienced it might not have been very large. If it is remade, I would be delighted for people to have the chance to experience it." End quote. A bombshell, in my humble opinion, if it is remade. This really hits the nail of the remaster's rumors on the head, right? As I said before, if the existence of this book didn't already put to bed rumors of the soon-to-come remasters of Prime 2 or 3, this quote definitely does. I'm not becoming a doomer about this either. I'm just looking at it pragmatically. This all but confirms that at the time this book was worked on, of which I'm not 100% sure, no remaster plans had been confirmed at Nintendo. There's also some speculation among Metroid fans about the language Tanabe used here. He specifically mentions remake. But Prime 1 Remastered isn't a remake, I hear you all proclaiming. Technically, Technically, it's not. Despite it being a faithful, essentially one-to-one remaster of the original game, the graphical overhaul was done in much the same way the original Prime was developed. He states later on in the book that assets were made from scratch, again, so I'd say it walks the line of being a remake despite not adding any new additional content to the base game, despite talks from Retro while making Prime Remastered to add new cutscenes. All that aside, the sad news is there is no Prime 2 and 3 remasters on the horizon just yet. Keyword here being yet. That isn't to say we'll never get them, it just likely won't be before Prime 4, which is launching in early December. My hope is that the game does well, like Prime 1 Remastered, so Nintendo gets wind that Metroid is still a popular IP. If it does, I think that'll spur them on to remaster 2 and 3. Of course, that's all just my speculation, given how much Nintendo loves profits, given how much they thought the Prime Remaster wouldn't sell, as they sold it for $40 considering all of the Switch games at that time were at least $60. I think they'd be incentivized to keep the love of the Prime series alive and turn a profit, remastering and reselling us 2 and 3. I mean, they've not announced Prime 2 for the GameCube Online just yet. That was a huge GameCube title, poor sales notwithstanding. So my thinking is that it could still happen at some point. Items of note about Prime 3. Some items of note specifically in the latter half of the book about the development of Prime 3 is supposedly a bounty hunting system that was proposed early on by Retro. Essentially, they envisioned bounty hunting as Samus's primary way to gather items and progress through mission-based bounties. That sounds amazing to me. The reason for suggesting such a pivot, according to Tanabe, was Retro attempting to attract more casual gamers after Prime 2's sales flopping. Given how Prime 4 looks to be more open-world-ish than 1, 2, and 3, I wonder if any of these ideas will come back in some form in the game. Samus traveling to different places or whatever, doing side quests or missions involving collecting certain bounties, fighting impossibly ferocious creatures. It all sounds very tantalizing to me. The inclusion of additional bounty hunters within Prime 3 was a very deliberate choice made by Nintendo and Retro, aimed at, quote, expanding the Metroid universe. This is followed up several pages later at the very end of the Prime 3 section, where Tanabe states that despite Prime 3 being a cap on the Prime trilogy, they have every intention on continuing the Prime series specifically. His exact words are, "The Phazon narrative arc reaches its conclusion in Prime 3, but the series will continue. Retro and our team at Nintendo will keep working together to the best of our ability to bring new stories for fans to enjoy," which is incredibly, incredibly exciting to me. If I haven't already made this clear enough, get yourself a copy of this book. Show the Retro and Nintendo teams working on the Prime series that we still care. I don't usually advocate for buying the products of large companies or studios, especially Nintendo, but I feel it's warranted here when Prime and the Metroid series as a whole have been put on the back burner for so long. We're a decently small community, but we show up when it matters for our girl Samus. Also, barring the nasty price, I recommend buying Prime 4 when that drops later this year as well. Though it's sad, the only way we can show Nintendo we care about the Prime series is by throwing money at them. It's very clear that sales directly influence how they'll go about keeping, or not keeping, the series alive going forward. No, Nintendo hasn't paid me anything to say this, by the way. I feel I should clarify, especially not after how I flamed them in my last Nintendo video. I'm just a guy who's passionate about Metroid. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Catch you next time.